Improve your English through stories. This afternoon, a cold wind swept through, but the sun managed to grace us with its presence for a brief hour or two. Taking a stroll on the moors behind our house, I observed the sheep seeking shelter beneath stone walls, while gray clouds loomed over the western hills, signaling the imminent arrival of winter. Although it's only November, there's a distinct scent of snow in the air, foretelling a cold winter in 1855. My name is Patrick Bronte, and at 78 years old, I serve as the rector of the village of Haworth. Nestled on a hill in the north of England, Haworth comprises small grey stone houses. My dwelling sits at the hill's summit, adjacent to the church and graveyard. I ambled through the graveyard to the church this afternoon, where all my family, except Anne, rests. Inside, dead leaves, carried by the wind, danced in the sunlight near the graves. Soon, I too will join my wife and children beneath the cold gray stone and amid the twirling leaves. As the darkness settles outside, our home is hushed. Mr. Nichols, Charlotte's husband, reads in his room, and our servant prepares a meal in the kitchen. Only the three of us inhabit this once lively abode. In the quiet, I hear the crackling of wood burning in the fire and the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the stairs. The wind outside adds its melodic voices to the tranquility. The wind, with its varied tones, weaves a tale, sometimes a song, laughter, or solitary whispers throughout the night. Last night, it cried like a child, prompting me to listen closely, though there was no child, only the wind and the silent gravestones illuminated by the pale moonlight. This prompted my decision to write the story of my children today, before it's too late. Mrs. Gaskell, a friend of Charlotte, is crafting a book about her, and I believe she may find my story intriguing. This tale began in April 1820, as we arrived in Haworth amid a robust wind. I am reminded of that day when Maria, my wife, voiced concern about the horses and opted to walk up the icy hill with the children. Maria, a petite and not particularly strong woman, carried baby Anne, while I held Emily, then 1.5 years old. The older children walked, and the people of Haworth watched our arrival. Our journey marked the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. The village welcomed its new rector, and with 7 carts laden with furniture, we ascended the icy hill. However, our joyous arrival contrasted sharply with the challenging conditions for the horses. Upon reaching our house, the biting wind greeted us, and Maria hastened inside to kindle fires. Later that night, I inquired about her impressions, and she, looking weary, acknowledged the fine house and expressed hope for it to be a good home. Her fatigue was apparent, likely due to the lengthy journey and the children. In the warmth of the firelight, I asked about her well-being, reminding her of her importance. She smiled, a beautiful and fleeting moment. Little did I know that 1.5 years later, she would be gone, after a prolonged and painful illness that kept her bedridden for 7 agonizing months. Maria, my beloved wife, passed away in September 1821. Maria was only 38 when it became my solemn duty to lay her to rest in the church. Our 6 young children stood silently, witnessing the somber occasion. Upon our return to the house, I gathered them in this room, addressing them gently. I urged them not to weep excessively, assuring them that their mother was now with God, finding happiness. I shared the inevitable truth about mortality, emphasizing that one day, if they were virtuous, they too would join God. However, the children, grappling with grief, questioned the circumstances of Maria's departure. In response to Maria's inquiry about why their mother had to leave them, I offered solace, acknowledging the mysteries of God's plan. I reminded them of their mother's love and the possibility that she could see them now. In the face of sorrow, I encouraged the children to work diligently, acquire knowledge, and practice kindness. A crucial task awaited my eldest daughter, Maria, who at the tender age of 8, assumed a maternal role, guiding her younger siblings. Aunt Elizabeth, or Aunt Branwell as we affectionately called her, arrived to offer her assistance. Although she disliked Haworth's harsh weather, Aunt Branwell devoted her life to supporting me in caring for her sister's children. Maria, industrious beyond her years, worked tirelessly, helping the younger ones with daily tasks and nurturing them like a mother. Despite her youth, she displayed advanced reading skills, often delving into books and newspapers available in our home. I took pride in discussing worldly matters with my children, introducing them to topics like the Duke of Wellington's actions in London. Maria, especially, demonstrated remarkable understanding and frequently read to her siblings from newspapers, engaging in insightful discussions with me. Recognizing their inherent intelligence, I regretted not having more time to interact with them. Consequently, in 1824, I made the decision to send them to school. I was born in Ireland, in a small house with only 2 rooms, and shared it with my 9 brothers and sisters. Despite our extreme poverty in a modest farm, there was a church nearby that housed a school, providing me with a singular opportunity for success. Diligently working through my studies, I became a teacher by the age of 16. Subsequently, I pursued further education at St. John's College, Cambridge. My efforts bore fruit, securing a curate position upon marriage, which afforded my family a good home. Recognizing the importance of education, I aspired to provide the best schooling for my children. In July 1824, I enrolled Maria and Elizabeth at Cowan Bridge School, and later that year, in September, I admitted Charlotte. In November, my youngest daughter Emily joined them. While Maria excelled academically, my pride in her achievements was tempered by my lack of knowledge regarding the harsh conditions at the school. The girls' letters did not convey the challenges they faced: burnt and inedible food, freezing beds, and unkind teachers. These revelations came later, and I questioned whether Maria refrained from sharing due to fear. In December, separated by the difficulties of travel over the cold hills, I spent Christmas alone in Haworth. Meanwhile, my daughters faced the harsh winter conditions at school, with no Christmas holidays and suffering from cold, hunger, and illness. Little Anne, aged 4, inquired about her sisters, prompting me to reassure her of their happiness at school. In February, however, an ominous letter arrived, conveying grave news about Maria's health. Over the hills, I hastened to bring her home, only to discover the dire state of all my daughters, Maria, Elizabeth, Charlotte, and Emily. The doctor declared that bringing them home was unnecessary, and I returned only with Maria, not foreseeing the tragic outcome. Maria's health deteriorated rapidly, and she passed away, followed by Elizabeth a month later. The grief of losing 2 daughters weighed heavily, with Charlotte and Emily returning home soon after. The tragic loss left me standing in the church, surrounded by the summer flowers I placed on their shared grave, reminiscing about the moments when their mother had held them in her arms, her smile brightening our world. I conveyed my regrets to my wife, expressing that they have returned to her. The little books began to shape my life. With 4 children, Charlotte, Branwell, Emily, and Anne. At home, I opted not to send them to school again for many years. The deaths of Maria and Elizabeth, coupled with the challenges at school, led me to keep them under my care. My sister-in-law, Aunt Branwell, assumed the role of their teacher, and I provided assistance whenever possible. My children, gifted and eager learners, displayed a love for reading, writing, drawing, and painting. The expansive moors behind the house provided a playground where they wandered for miles, strengthened by the winds and the solitude. Despite the challenges of life in Haworth, a place where many children succumb to illness and accidents, I was cautious to prevent harm, avoiding curtains and carpets due to fire concerns. In 1826, a box of toy soldiers introduced a new dimension to their lives. The children, inspired by the miniature figurines, began weaving stories of battles and adventures. Their creativity flourished, with each child contributing to the evolving narratives. This marked the inception of secret books, small manuscripts filled with imaginative tales that the children worked on tirelessly. One day, I discovered their secret project. Intrigued, I asked about their endeavors, to which Charlotte responded that they were writing their secret books. They shared some stories but kept countless others hidden. These early creative pursuits laid the foundation for their later literary achievements. Charlotte and Branwell delved into the tales of Angria, while Emily and explored the world of Gondal. Battles, love stories, letters, and poems populated these fictional realms. Despite their young ages, Charlotte at 10, Emily at 8, their prolific writing continued unabated. Some of their works were small in size, filled with intricate drawings and tiny writing. All of Charlotte's little books are now in Mr. Nicholls' possession, stored in a cupboard in his room. The writing is small, and my aging eyes struggle to read them. Charlotte and Branwell's stories unfolded in Angria, while Emily and Anne's creative energy flowed into Gondal. They constructed an intricate world with battles, love stories, newspapers, maps, and illustrations. Evenings in our home were filled with readings and prayers, a time when I connected with my family. However, one night, waking up at 10, I found Charlotte and Branwell in my room, looking at a picture on the wall. Their creative spirits were alive, and they were exploring the world of imagination that would later shape their literary legacies. Branwell said it's the Duke of Zamona and the Duke of Northumberland fighting in Glass Town. I looked at the picture, now behind me, and it's an illustration from a biblical story with a town, mountains, and hundreds of people in it. Perplexed, I asked them to explain. Charlotte clarified to her father that the picture in the room was from one of their stories. They would come in to look at the picture and then create the storyline. Intrigued, I sat down to hear their tale. They were both excited, their faces pink, and their eyes bright in the candlelight. They explained that the Duke of Wellington's son, Arthur, Duke of Zamorna, and Branwell's toy soldier, Bonaparte, had transformed into the strong, bad, good-looking Duke of North England. The two dukes were engaged in a fierce battle in a city called Glass Town. The story was filled with brave soldiers, beautiful women falling in love, and the vivid details of an imaginary world. I listened until 2 o'clock in the morning, captivated by their creativity. The details of the story may have faded from my memory, but the excitement in my children's faces lingered. The next day, they didn't speak much about it, and I didn't press them. It was their secret world, and I cherished that they had shared it with me, even if just once. Sometimes they showed me drawings of places in Angria or Gondal. All my children were gifted artists, each excelling in drawing and painting. Charlotte used watercolors, spending hours creating small, intricate pictures. Branwell, with his oil paints, painted portraits of people in the village, easily recognizable in his work. He later painted a fine portrait of his 3 sisters, a source of great pride for me. We believed Branwell would become a famous artist. When Charlotte turned 15, she returned to school, attending Miss Wooler's school at Roe Head. Although she may not have enjoyed it, she worked hard because she aspired to become a teacher or governess. Meanwhile, Branwell studied under my guidance, and Aunt Branwell taught Emily and Anne. Music also became a part of their education, with the girls and Branwell learning to play the piano. Emily and Anne had dogs, Flossie and Keeper, respectively, and they often took them for walks on the moors. Emily, especially, had a deep connection with her dog, Keeper, whom she adored. While Emily could be reserved and shy, especially outside the family, she had a special bond with her dog. When she was older, I sent Emily to school with Charlotte, but she detested it, prompting me to bring her back home, in her place, and attended school. Branwell, on the other hand, was outgoing and could strike up a conversation with anyone, making him well-liked in Haworth. I recall the day in 1835 when Branwell ventured to London at the age of 18, aspiring to attend the Royal Academy to pursue his dream of becoming an artist. Carrying a bag containing his best paintings on his back, he descended the hill in Haworth, drawing the attention of everyone in the village who came out to witness his departure. It was a momentous day for me, yet something unfortunate occurred in London during his stay. However, the details eluded me as Branwell returned after 2 weeks with a pale complexion and soiled clothes. Despite my inquiries, he remained tight-lipped, spending hours alone in his room. Subsequently, I arranged for a workspace for him in Bradford, thinking he could paint portraits of renowned figures. Unfortunately, this endeavor proved unsuccessful, leading to a depletion of my funds. Eventually, he returned home, marking a somber period for me. Struggling with deteriorating eyesight, I had to enlist a young curate's help for my church duties. Additionally, my long-serving servant, Tabby, suffered a broken leg, compounding the challenges. During this trying time, I received a letter from Miss Wooler's school, read to me by my curate. The letter conveyed alarming news about Anne's grave illness, prompting me to hasten to Roe Head. Within 6 hours, I arrived, relieved to find Anne still alive. A month later, she thankfully recovered. Despite the joy of having all my children safely at home, my elderly age, poor eyesight, and limited financial resources posed challenges. The necessity for my children to find employment weighed heavily on me, raising the pressing question of what kind of work they could pursue. Monsieur Heger, a friendly and kind man, gave me a tour of the school in Brussels where my daughters, Charlotte and Emily, were studying. Although my French was not perfect, I smiled and tried my best to communicate with him. The girls were thrilled with the opportunity. Initially, things went well. Monsieur Heger wrote to me, expressing satisfaction with my daughter's progress. However, back in Haworth, life became challenging. My curate passed away, and Aunt Branwell fell seriously ill. Emily and Charlotte returned home to see her, but she had already passed away. Elizabeth Branwell, a good woman, had managed our home for over 2 decades. My eyesight deteriorated significantly, and our loyal servant Tabby was older than me, and, employed as a governess by the Robinson family, couldn't assist me. Branwell found a job teaching the Robinsons' son, while Charlotte returned to Brussels alone, taking up a teaching position in Monsieur Heger's school. Emily chose to stay at home, attending to household chores and keeping me company. She had a unique, quiet demeanor and often spent time writing and talking with and about their imaginary world of Gondal. Emily loved solitude and frequently walked the moors with her dog, Keeper. She enjoyed shooting, a skill I taught her before my eyesight worsened. By 1844, I couldn't continue shooting due to my eyesight, but Emily continued her walks with Keeper. She had a stern side, as shown when she disciplined Keeper for entering forbidden areas. As Charlotte returned from Brussels, she seemed quiet and melancholic. Despite her efforts, no letters came from Monsieur Heger. Nevertheless, the girls were filled with hope, eagerly awaiting the arrival of the first students for their new school. They had crafted compelling advertisements, reaching out to newspapers and contacts in anticipation of this exciting venture. Our anticipation stretched on, as Charlotte penned additional advertisements, yet no children answered the call. Day by day, Charlotte and Emily waited for correspondence or parental visits, their optimism waning. And, having left her position with the Robinsons, returned home for a visit, and soon after, Branwell joined for a holiday. One early morning, a knock stirred hope. Charlotte rushed to the door, only to find it wasn't a parent but a letter addressed to Branwell. As he ascended to read it, a piercing scream erupted from his room. Rushing upstairs, we discovered him on his bed, screaming with a pale face and wild, dark eyes, holding the letter. Distraught and chilled, he declared it all finished and spoke of dying without her. Charlotte and Emily attended to him, offering a cup of hot milk, but Branwell's trembling hands almost caused it to spill. Noticing his feverish state, Charlotte insisted he retire to bed. In the following days, Branwell cycled between sleep, shouts, and tears. Attempts at conversation proved futile, and eventually disclosed the tragic tale. Branwell had fallen in love with Mrs. Robinson, the wealthy mother of his pupil. Convinced she would marry him, he had developed a deep connection with her. Mr. Robinson, suspicious of their relationship, discovered the truth and demanded Branwell cut ties. In response to my palpable anger, Branwell, intoxicated and distressed, insisted on reuniting with Mrs. Robinson, expressing profound love for her. Despite my efforts to reason with him, he refused to listen, running out of the house and returning in the evening intoxicated. As his condition worsened with the addition of laudanum, I feared he might take his own life. My desperate attempts to guide him were met with defiance, leaving me anguished over my son's self-destructive path. Charlotte seemed content that no parents expressed interest in the school, likely relieved to avoid the challenge of incorporating Branwell into their plans. Meanwhile, my vision had deteriorated significantly, and Arthur Nichols, a diligent 28-year-old from Northern Ireland, took on the bulk of my responsibilities. Branwell's condition worsened over time, and Mr. Robinson's death in 1846 did not lead to his anticipated marriage to Mrs. Robinson. Instead, she callously sent Branwell away and later wed a wealthy older man. As Branwell descended into alcohol and laudanum use, he spent increasing hours wandering the moors alone. Blindness heightened my sensitivity to sounds, and I found solace in the symphony of wind, ticking clocks, crackling fires, and the familiar footsteps and voices of my daughters echoing through the house. Despite my visual impairment, I became aware of Anne's burgeoning success as she had a poem published in a magazine. Eavesdropping on a conversation between Charlotte and Emily, I discerned they were discussing Emily's poems related to the Gondal saga. A spirited debate ensued, with Charlotte urging Emily to publish their poems collectively, while Emily vehemently opposed the idea, insisting they were solely for her and Anne's understanding. The heated exchange left me troubled, especially when Charlotte expressed her desire to publish the poems for wider readership. I wanted to caution them against it, drawing from my own experience of publishing books at a personal financial loss. However, my inability to see restricted my ability to intervene in their creative disputes. Not many people purchased the books, and it proved to be an easy way to lose money. I later learned that they paid over £30 to have a book of poems printed, which ultimately sold only 2 copies. Their financial struggles remained hidden from me due to our household's limited resources. In the summer of 1846, Charlotte took me to see an eye doctor in Manchester. Following the operation, while recovering in a dark room, a postman delivered a packet for Corrible. Charlotte, sounding melancholic, acknowledged it was for a friend and did not open it in my presence. She continued writing in the adjacent room, and when asked about the packet, she simply mentioned it was for a friend, dismissing any further inquiry. Upon our return to Haworth, I regained the ability to see clearly, appreciating the beauty of our surroundings. However, Branwell's condition had deteriorated significantly. His appearance was haunting, and he incessantly sought money, spending nights in my room sharing troubled thoughts about Mrs. Robinson. The winter of 1846 brought harsh cold, claiming lives in the village, and fell ill, and Branwell's condition worsened. I spent most of my time with Branwell, overlooking the girl's well-being. Then, one afternoon, Charlotte entered my room with a book, revealing that she had written Jane Eyre under the pen name Currer Bell. Charlotte shared the praise the book received in prominent magazines, highlighting its positive reception. I expressed concern about potential financial losses, but she reassured me that the publishers covered the printing costs. The revelation marked a surprising turn, with Charlotte achieving recognition under the pseudonym Currer Bell. Charlotte playfully informed her father that the initials CB stand for both Charlotte Brontë and Cara Bell. She handed me the book, and as I began to read, time seemed to fly. The story of Jane Eyre unfolded, a tale of a little girl facing adversity, similar to the challenges Maria faced in her early years. The poignant narrative included Jane's time at Lowood, a school reminiscent of the harsh conditions at Cowan Bridge. The death of Jane's friend, Helen Burns, echoed the pain of losing my own daughter, Maria. Despite the tears, the book's beauty held me captivated. At 5 o'clock, I entered the sitting room where my 3 daughters eagerly awaited my verdict. Holding up Jane Eyre, I announced to the girls that Charlotte had written a book, and it was not just good, it was truly exceptional. Emily and Anne were aware of Charlotte's literary endeavors, dating back over a year when she had penned The Professor. The rejected manuscript, addressed to Cara Bell, circulated among publishers, an overlooked detail in the excitement of Jane Eyre's success. In Manchester, while recovering from my surgery, Charlotte revealed that she had commenced writing Jane Eyre. The journey from manuscript to publication was remarkably swift, taking only 6 months. Charlotte's radiant smile expressed the joy of creative accomplishment. However, the worst day occurred during our trip to Manchester when the rejected packet returned, a moment marking the inception of Jane Eyre. Charlotte, undeterred, transformed adversity into literary success within a short time frame. Amidst the celebration, Charlotte disclosed that Emily and Anne had also authored books of comparable quality, soon to be published under the pseudonyms Ellis Bell and Acton Bell. Despite initial surprise, I embraced each of my daughters, moved by their literary achievements and their creative use of pseudonyms to challenge societal prejudices against female authors. Overwhelmed with pride and gratitude, I found it difficult to articulate my emotions. Charlotte's radiant smile mirrored Maria's, filling the room with a warmth reminiscent of cherished moments from the past. The father expresses happiness for his children's achievements and happiness. He notices something in Emily's expression, prompting him to ask if he can read her book. Emily hesitates, mentioning it's different from Charlotte's, but she agrees. The father acknowledges the differences between his daughters and expresses love for both, eagerly anticipating the chance to read Emily and Anne's books. I read both their books that winter. Anne's Agnes Grey was a poignant tale of an unhappy governess, and as I read, I felt sorrowful, contemplating Anne's own struggles in a large house far from home, where understanding was scarce. It was a good book, albeit more challenging to read than Jane Eyre. Emily's book, Wuthering Heights, was an entirely different experience. A terrible, frightening, and wonderful story unfolded, featuring elements of love, hate, and fear. The character of Heathcliff, strong and cruel like the devil himself, left a lasting impression. One night, as the wind screamed around the house and snow battered the windows, I found myself afraid. Later, when I went to bed, I discovered Emily sitting quietly by the fire, stroking her large dog Keeper with one hand and drawing a picture with the other. There was something unique and powerful about her, something stronger than her sisters, even Charlotte, and more robust than her brother Branwell. Throughout that year, Branwell's health deteriorated. Increasingly consumed by drinking, he slept during the day and remained awake at night. His face turned pallid, and his trembling hands. After my only son's last breath, we laid him to rest beside his mother and little sisters on a cold, rainy afternoon. The graveyard, scattered with wet leaves, felt desolate as the wind blew rain into our grieving faces. Returning home, Emily, soaked from walking in the rain with her faithful dog, Keeper, soon fell ill. Charlotte, deeply concerned, suggested calling a doctor, but Emily refused, expressing her aversion to medical intervention. Her deteriorating health manifested in difficulty breathing and slow movements, and her refusal to seek medical help persisted. Emaciated and weak, Emily maintained her routine, rising at 7 and remaining downstairs until 10 at night. She consumed little, coughed for hours, sometimes producing blood. Despite her sister's concern, Emily remained resilient, asserting that her failing body no longer mattered to her. The relentless coughing and frail appearance mirrored Branwell's decline, but Emily embraced her condition with stoic acceptance. One day, Charlotte brought heather from the moors, hoping to lift Emily's spirits. Lying on the sofa with Keeper by her side, Emily struggled to see the flowers. Although Charlotte placed a small purple heather in her hand, Emily, too weak to hold it, dropped it to the floor. Eventually, she agreed to see a doctor, a decision that came too late. Thin and fragile, her white skin resembling paper, Emily closed her eyes. As we awaited the doctor, and was urged to fetch him, his arrival confirmed what we already knew: Emily, my beloved daughter, was gone. The year 1848 became a year of multiple funerals, with many children from the village and, tragically, my own daughters. The weight of grief hung heavily in Haworth, as families mourned their lost little ones. The sorrow continued as Anne, too, fell ill. Struggling to breathe, coughing incessantly, her face pale, and diligently followed the doctor's advice but found little relief. In the spring, she expressed a desire to go to the sea for a warmer climate, heeding the doctor's counsel to wait. I anticipated Anne's death before her departure. In May, Charlotte accompanied her to York, where they marveled at the grandeur of York Minster, contemplating the beauty humans could create and pondering the essence of God's true abode. Charlotte shared this experience in a letter from Scarborough, a seaside town on the northeast coast, where and, delighting in the seaside, rode a donkey on the beach and expressed happiness. On May 28, Anne's health declined, preventing her from going out. She passed away peacefully at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, finding her final resting place near the sea. And, the youngest and loveliest of my children, left behind another book, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, narrating the story of a woman who escaped her oppressive husband, and was proud of her creation, and so was I. At 29, she expressed her reluctance to die, burdened with numerous ideas and unwritten books. Upon Charlotte's return, the dogs joyfully greeted her, perhaps expecting Anne, Emily, and Branwell to accompany her. Yet, it was only Charlotte, the smallest, not the prettiest, not the strongest, and not the strangest. God had taken those attributes for himself, leaving me with the child who would become the most renowned and the one who nearly became a mother. Charlotte continued her literary pursuits, crafting 2 more books, Shirley, depicting a resilient woman akin to her sister Emily, and Villette, exploring the nuances of love between a teacher and a pupil. However, Jane Eyre remained her most celebrated work, garnering widespread acclaim across England. Charlotte ventured to London, engaging with famous writers, but her heart always drew her back to Haworth. In 1852, just before Christmas, tragedy struck. From my room, I overheard fragments of the conversation between Charlotte and the curate, Arthur Nichols, revealing distressing news that would forever alter our lives. Mr. Nichols interrupted my solitude with a proposition of great significance. He confessed his profound feelings for Charlotte, declaring a desire to marry her. The words chilled me, stirring anger within, for he was but a good curate earning his stipend. I confronted him sternly, insisting on his immediate departure and an end to any further communication with my daughter. As the encounter unfolded, Mr. Nichols, aghast and near tears, left my presence. He lingered in his own dwelling for 3 days, refusing sustenance and sending me irate letters. Charlotte, however, made her stance clear in correspondence, rejecting his proposal. Accepting defeat, Mr. Nichols decided to embark on a new chapter, planning a journey to Australia. Unexpectedly, the story took a twist. In April of 1854, Mr. Nichols returned to Haworth, accompanied by Charlotte. Their entrance into my room carried an air of significance, hinting at something untold. Despite my initial displeasure, they revealed their shared decision. Mr. Nichols had abandoned his plan to Australia. The revelation struck me as an unsettling change, leaving my blood running cold, as I questioned the motivations behind this unexpected turn of events. After much disagreement and tears, I reluctantly granted my approval for Charlotte and Mr. Nichols to marry. The wedding took place in June, though I could not bring myself to attend. They returned to live with me, and Mr. Nichols became my curate. Contrary to my initial reservations, Mr. Nichols proved to be a good husband to Charlotte. Over time, I realized the depth of his love for her, and our home regained its warmth and laughter. Charlotte and Mr. Nichols traveled to Ireland and even took on much of the church work. In December 1854, Charlotte shared exciting news. She was expecting a child. The revelation stirred memories of the joyous times when our home echoed with children's laughter. However, this joy was short-lived. Charlotte fell ill early the following year, and despite Mr. Nichols' care, she succumbed to illness on March 31, 1855. As Charlotte lay in bed, she shared the heartbreaking fear of leaving Mr. Nichols. Her final words expressed the happiness they had found together. The house fell silent as I walked out, and the church bell tolled to announce Charlotte's passing to the world. Now, in the quiet of the early morning, I reflect on the life and loss of my daughter Charlotte. The wind has ceased, and the house is still. The clock ticks quietly, and upstairs, Mr. Nichols sleeps peacefully. I consider whether to share these words with Mrs. Gaskell, who is writing about Charlotte, but ultimately decide to keep them for myself and perhaps share them with Mr. Nichols. As I contemplate the fame of Charlotte, Emily, and Anne, I imagine my late wife, Maria, appreciating their literary achievements. On this calm night, under the moon and stars, I am drawn to the graveyard and the church, where I will have a quiet conversation with Maria.